A very good evening to you all. Welcome you all to the 4th International Virtual Workshop on Research Methodology and Writing Skills, jointly organized by Lavender Literary Club India, Capcom Marine Trust India, and Malaysian Industrial Relations and Human Resource Association, Malaysia. I extend my warmest welcome to the speakers of today's session. Today we have two speakers, Dr. S. Vijay Kumar, Assistant Professor of English, B.S. Abdul Rahman Crescent Institute of Science and Technology, Chennai, and Dr. Dorian Karthikavangi, Associate Professor and Head, School of Communication, Atmajaya Catholic University of Indonesia. Now we're moving on to the first speaker, Dr. S. Vijay Kumar, Assistant Professor of English at B.S. Abdul Rahman Crescent Institute of Science and Technology, Chennai. He holds a Master's in English and in Applied Linguistics. His PhD is on integration of multimedia technologies for teaching world writing. Current research project is based on blended on online instruction with special emphasis on developing prototype models of blended learning. He is the editorial board member of English language teaching, and he has completed Web of Science certification series both in basic and advanced, organized by Clarivate. It's my immense pleasure to invite Dr. Vijay Kumar to this scenario. Over to you, sir.
Just a minute. Thank you very much for that nice introduction, and I'm really glad to meet you on a Sunday evening. The very fact that you are here on a Sunday evening very much testifies your commitment for professional excellence, because as I said, on a Sunday evening you could be anywhere. Maybe you could be sitting before a TV for entertainment, but the extraordinary commitment and the passion for research is truly exhibited by your mere presence. So in that context, I'm really happy to just start the session on this 4-day international virtual conference on research methodology and writing skills. So at the outset, let me profoundly thank Lavender Literary Club and the Cape Comorin Trust and the Malaysian Industrial Relations and Human Resource Association, and particularly Dr. Frank Joyson for roping me in for this event. So as I said, I'm indeed glad to be a part of this program and to set the context actually to this wonderful event on research. So having said that, let me begin. My title of my talk is entitled Formulating Clear Research Statement, Research Questions and Hypothesis. So during the remaining 1 hour, I would just like to give you a lot of interesting caveats for self-reflection. So I don't want it to be a lecture. Every time I talk to you, I'll stop and I'll make you reflect on certain elements of your research. So before we begin any venture like this or any session like this, I just want to know the areas that you are working on. Can I just have any few text messages to know about the audience analysis, probably the area that the researchers are working on? Probably what kind of audience? Is it a pure literature audience or a science audience or an ELT? So if you could just text your broad area, that would be a great start. And I would like to specify my talks based on the ambit of the scholars. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah.
My name is Randa Vyas. I am MA B.Ed MPhil.
Yeah.
Now, 12 years back, I completed my MPhil, and recently I have enrolled for PhD. So they suggested me that as there is a long gap, you better go for a small refresher course or seminar. That's why I'm here. Now, my MPhil was on Shobha De's novels, Selfishness in Human Relations, with special reference to Shobha De's novels. And my PhD topic, I am probably thinking there is a comparative study between D.S. Lawrence and Shobha De.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you very much, ma'am, for that insight on what you are currently doing. So I understand that this audience is going to be an exclusive literature-based audience. Probably there could be some from ELT, some could be doing some kind of intervention research, maybe some from the scientific community as well. If I am right, Dr. Frank Joyson, is it a kind of a multifarious audience?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Multi.
Yeah, multidisciplinary. So I just want to know that, because I cannot exclusively place my examples on ELT and literature alone. So I'll try to keep it not too specific, but very broad, so that we can cater to everybody's requirement. So how to start your research journey? And it all boils down to having a good research question to start with. So during the remaining part of my talk, the first part of my talk will be on how to formulate an impactful research problem. I request the participants to please mute your microphones. If any of your microphones are unmuted, please do mute. So my first part of the talk is going to be how to formulate a research problem. The second part of my talk is going to be how to write impactful research questions. And to write research questions, I'm going to give you two frameworks which are universally acclaimed and great benchmarks for research. One is called the Finer Maps framework for formulating research questions. If you have not heard that, Finer Maps, let me tell you what Finer Maps stand for a little later during the course of the talk. And my third objective is to formulate a suitable hypothesis for your research. So I'm going to place my discussion, my arguments, my examples, my statements and exemplifications based on these three aspects. So having said that, let me actually share my screen and walk you through on a reflective journey. So I request the participants to, for every question I ask, it's not that I'm expecting answers from you, but I want you to reflect your research aspects and probably mull over it. Only then the session will be an effective session, or else it will be a mere subjective talk. So in order to be very objective and empirical by nature, you should apply it now and then. So I hope that you apply the concepts of this talk that we discussed today. So let me share my screen and start my presentation on how to formulate a clear research problem and what are the effective frameworks for writing a very good research question or questions, and finally how to align your hypothesis based on your research questions and your research problem. So this is the map of my talk, and let us just move on and let me present my screen now. I hope I'm sharing my screen. Am I?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. So the first thing we need to remember is your research starts with a problem, but the biggest problem is identifying the problem. This is a kind of an hackneyed cliche in research that people say identifying the problem is the biggest problem in research, which means if you have identified that this is the problem I am going to investigate, you have a clear roadmap and a clear idea of your destination. But many researchers, unfortunately, do not have a clear roadmap. So identifying the problem is the biggest problem in research. So how to identify the problem? Let us discuss now. My own voice is echoing. Is there somebody who is unmuted? May I request the participants to once again check if you are muted? Let me also check if I have any other devices on. because my voice is echoing. All right, so a lot better now. Let's move on to a research problem. I want you to think about, I'm going to give you a sample research problem, and then I would want you to think about your research problem, and then let me tell you what are the ingredients of a research problem. So what does the problem mean? Let me give you an example. Okay, let me give you an example of what the problem is. Okay, I will give, as far as my research is concerned, during my PhD, I was working on using multimedia tools for teaching writing skills. So my research problem was, I found that many of the students found writing to be a very demanding task. Of course, they were very good at speaking, but most of them, when it comes to academic writing and research writing, they found it very, very challenging. So I established my research context by stating that my problem is, I have encountered a lot of students who have problems in academic writing. So that is my context. So what is your context for your research? No matter what you're working on. Okay. For example, you could be even a medical researcher, or you could be a researcher from literature. For example, let me give you another example based on literature. People generally read science fiction with no clear theoretical background, but applying the theory of cyberpunk, the science fiction could be better read, better understood. So what is your real problem? So what is the need? So you have to establish your context, which means, why are you doing your research? For example, there was a researcher who said that she is working on show body, or probably perhaps right now she said that she's doing a current research on a comparative study on D.H. Lawrence and the and one more author, if I don't remember. So you have to clearly establish the context as to why you are actually doing that particular research. So that is one thing. Secondly, think about this particular example. Let us take a very common example that is within the reach of every researcher here. Let us take the students' attention level in classrooms, in online classrooms. I think this example will be a better example regardless of the domain, because everybody can easily understand. So the ideal situation is, today we expect our students not to be really distracted. We expect them to be really focused, but the ideal situation is focused. But how is the current situation? The students are not focused in the online classrooms. They have a lot of distractions. Now, how would your idea make the situation better? For example, let us say you are proposing a new pedagogy. You're proposing a new model. Let's say you're proposing a new theory. So how is your idea going to be transformative? How is your idea going to make a change in the educational landscape? How is your idea going to make the situation better? So, dear researchers, first of all, you need to talk about the nature of the problem, and then you need to talk about the current situation and the need for the problem, and then you need to talk about how your research would make that problem better. So you need to talk about these things. Most importantly, many researchers make these mistakes of having many problems, maybe 2 or 3 problems in their research study. Research is considered to be a kind of a very, very narrow endeavor. So you should have only one problem that you are investigating. For example, if you look at a novel from a feministic aspect, you look only from a feministic aspect, not from the Marxist or not from any other aspect. So there should be only one problem that you are addressing in your research, which means that your research should be narrow. So what is my one problem? My problem is I am addressing only students' attention deficit in online class. So which means you should have only one problem, but you can have many research questions. Now, so this is a broad outline of a research problem, which means, as I told you, to briefly encapsulate or distill the essence of what I have said. What is the current situation? How would your research improve the current situation? And what is your single idea? And what is the purpose for your study? Your purpose could be different. Your purpose could be to interpret authors. Your purpose could be to evaluate a program. Your purpose could be to do an intervention. Your purpose could be to compare and contrast. So your purpose could be to examine the policy. Your purpose could be to investigate two fields. Your purpose could be to check out the effectiveness of a new medicine. So depending on the research, you have very clear purpose. So dear researchers, I can't give you a one size fits all approach, and your research problem depends on your domain. Now, I hope you have got my first point. So I have now made my first point. Now, my first point is you should have keywords for that point. What is my keyword? Students' attention deficit in online classrooms. So attention deficit, online classrooms, these are my keywords. So this is what research problem is. I hope you have understood what a research problem is. So now let us discuss the sources of research problem. How do you arrive at a research problem? But before I do that, let me just ask you a question and have just one short interaction with you. Maybe just ask you a question about this. Can I have any volunteer talking to me about your research problem? Why are you investigating what you are investigating? Why is your research, why does your research merit deeper investigation? Can I get any answer from any one of the researchers? What is the nature of your research problem? Can I? Why are you actually doing what you are doing? So that is called the research problem. Okay, just reflect on it. Even if you don't answer, reflect on it. Why does your topic merit deeper investigation? Why should you investigate it? Why should you interpret? Why should you compare and contrast, or why should you analyze something? So this is called the research problem. So I have made my first point. My first point refers to identifying a suitable research problem. I hope I have made my first point clear. Have I? I mean, am I making myself clear? Is my first point clear to the participants?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. So let's move on to the second aspect. So what are the sources to identify your research problem? So how to actually identify? Let me go to the sources of identification. Now, where do I identify my research problem? My research problem could be based on my personal experience. For example, I am an educationalist. I am a teacher by profession. Every day I teach students. So based on my personal experience, I find that students' attention spans have drastically come down over the span of 10 years. So I feel that doing a research study on attention deficit will be suitable. So my source of my research problem could be based on my personal experience. Probably I would have read a lot of authors. There would be some authors who have fascinated me or enthralled me, whereas some authors' work I would have found it so riveting. And if I read some texts, I become so engrossed in that, and that is why I am researching on that particular author. So your source of a research problem could be based on your personal experience, and as I said, it could be based on your practical experience as well. For example, if you are a medical professional and you test the blood pressure level of students, of patients, and what are the situations where their pressure really shoots up. So everyday's experiences practically could be a great source of your research problem. So my practical experience of meeting the students, finding them so distracted, kind of really instilled the curiosity in me to actually investigate about this particular problem. So your source of research problem could be based on a personal experience. Well, it could be based on practical experience. Well, your research problem could be a social issue. Sometimes, why is there so much of gender disparity? Again, purely interpretive studies, ethnographic studies, literature-based studies, qualitative studies are based on social issues. You may read social issues. And the fourth source could be critical appraisal of literature. You may try to read a particular text with a different theoretical lens. Probably different persons would have read fiction with a different theoretical lens. Probably from a feministic perspective, from the Marxist perspective, from the psychoanalytic perspective, but probably no researcher would have read it from the from the aspect of cyber psychological aspects, or which we call the cyberpunk theory. So you can critically appraise using a different theoretical lens. The fifth source could be, you may look at previous research on your area and address an already researched issue from a new dimension. It's not that people have not researched on D.H. Lawrence, but probably you find that there is a problem with the approach of earlier researchers. So my comparative study is different because I am working on different variables. I am looking for something in a text which others have not seen. So I am giving this example because the particular researcher has given me a practical example. Likewise, if you all give examples in the remaining part of your talk, I'll place my arguments based on your research. So the next point of finding a good research problem could be based on existing theories. You may look at a lot of theories. For example, you may look at psychoanalytic theory. A lot of researchers have worked on psychoanalytic theory. But in medical humanities, there is an offshoot of the theory which is called the trauma theory. A few people might not have, trauma theory maybe still has to be investigated more deeply. So you may compare, you may club both psychoanalytical and trauma theory and do an exhaustive study. So that could be the source of your research problem. Or you could discuss your research problem with your supervisor, with your fellow scholars, or with others whom you feel have trenchant insights about your research area, someone who you feel or very, very knowledgeable. Or you could just go and consult the experts. So friends, as I said, the biggest problem in research is to identify the problem. So identifying the problem is the biggest problem. So once you have identified the problem clearly, then you can find solutions to it. So unfortunately today, many scholars are really grappling with lack of focus, and they are not able to really pigeonhole what they are doing. Even after 1 or 2 years, if you ask the research scholars, they still are quite hazy because they have not clearly distilled or zeroed in on the research problem. So once you get the problem right, you will have a very clear roadmap, and that is a great beginning for your research. So dear fellow researchers, I have made my second point, and my second point is how to identify a research problem. I mean, what are the sources? Yes, as I said, your source could be a personal experience. The source of identifying could be your practical experience. The source of problem could be a social issue. The source of problem could be critical appraisal of literature. The source of problem could be based on what previous researchers have done. The source of your problem could be based on existing theories in theory-based research. The source of your problem could be an outcome of discussion that you had with a few people, or the source of the problem that you have identified could be an outcome of the consultation you had with an expert from your domain. So please tell me, researchers, have I made my second point clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. So it clearly, so these 2 points on what is a research problem and how to actually frame a research problem, and then what are the sources of a research problem. So having said that, let us move to the third element. Now I want you to do a small activity. Now activity, maybe we may not have time. When I mean by activity, it's not that you have to come into this public forum and do, but you have to think about it. We can call this as a self-reflection activity. Please reflect on this. I'll give you a situation. You try a mind map. First thing is write your topic. Okay, your research topic. Generally, my research topic is probably, I could say, attention deficit in children. So when I say attention deficit in students, it's a very general thing. So what are my keywords there? So first write down your topic. This is an exercise. What are some of the keywords in your topic? What are the keywords that you are going to articulate? So for example, attention deficit is a keyword, and then another keyword could be the behavioral aspects. Another keyword could be online teaching. Another keyword could be students' reactions. So after writing your keywords and your topic, write a small rough paragraph on your research proposal, what you intend to do. Once you have that rough framework, take those rough words and each of these keywords, kind of investigate it very, very deeply. And now ask yourself 2 questions. Question number 1, does this topic excite you? Do you find the topic fascinating? Do you think that this topic is going to sustain your interest? Do you think that this topic is going to hold your interest for so long, for a period of 4 years? So secondly, it's not enough if your topic excites you. Does the topic excite your research supervisor as well? So once you get to this point where both the scholar and the supervisor have agreed that the topic is fascinating, have agreed that the problem is worth investigating, have agreed that the problem merits deeper investigation, I think it's good to start your research journey. So I have made my first point crystal clear on the importance of a research problem, on what are the sources of identifying the research problem, and a small reflection activity of writing down your topic, your keywords, and a short rough outline of what is your plan, and then probably start your journey. So at this juncture, let me kind of stop at this juncture. But before I do that, I would like to walk you through this particular slide and extend this reflection. So look at this particular slide. You will better understand how to actually identify your research problem. The first thing is a topic. As I said, what is your subject area? Subject area could be any particular domain or any particular topic. Secondly, what is the problem in that particular domain? Okay, what is the concern? What is the problem? Thirdly, why does the problem need a solution? See, it's not enough to identify a problem, but you should be able to justify that the problem you are investigating needs a solution. For example, literature research. My particular theory will help to understand the author better. A comparative lens would still try to unravel the hidden layers of meanings that are actually camouflaged inside the text. So like that. So third point, justify your problem. Now you have identified your problem, justify why it is an important problem, why that problem is going to be practically relevant, and then talk about deficiencies. Maybe you can also say that other people have also addressed the problem, but there are deficiencies in their evidence. They have not looked at this particular issue. Perhaps they have looked at that angle, but not from this angle. So what are the deficiencies? And then how are you going to address those issues? As I said, the issue could be on policy making, it could be interpretive, it could be any type. So this is the essence of research problem. I hope you have understood a research problem. At this juncture, let me stop my presentation. I won't say stop my presentation. At this juncture, let me help you to actually reflect on what I have been saying so far. I believe that you have got your research problem very clear. I believe that you have reflected on your research problem regardless of your domain. I also believe that you can think about this reflective activity I told you. Maybe by the end of the lecture, when you go home, probably you can just write down the title of your research, then write down the research problem, the problem that you're investigating. Thirdly, why the problem merits deeper investigation. Fourthly, how have other researchers looked at this problem? Fifthly, how you are going to address this problem. So you would just go on discussing like that. So shall I move on to the second point now? So the first part of my talk is based on research questions. Shall I move on to the second segment of my talk?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. My second segment of my talk pertains to how to formulate clear questions. So any journey does not begin with an answer. Any intellectual pursuit begins with questions. It is only questions that fascinate people. It is only questions that has led people to greater truth. It is questions that has instilled the curiosity in humans. It is the questions that has led to groundbreaking discoveries. It is the questions that provide the spark and the fuel for imagination. So questions are pivotal. Questions or the fuel for the research journey. So now let me tell you how to formulate question, how to frame suitable research questions, what are the international framework. So I'm going to talk to you about a framework called as FINER maps, FINER MAPS. Let me tell you what each letter stands for. After the end of my talk, I will do a reflection activity. I want you to raise some questions about your research. And after you raise questions, you should look at the framework that I am giving. And then you should evaluate whether your questions fall in the ambit of the framework that I am discussing with you. So let me now move on to the research questions. Okay, here we are. So yeah, so let's move on. So the research question is actually the starting point of your journey. It's like a lighthouse. A research question is like the lighthouse, which means once you frame very clear questions all through the 4 years, you will be focused on finding answers to your questions. But sometimes some researchers, being so enthusiastic, they read a lot and they get very diverted. It's like a ship that has lost its destination. It goes somewhere, but whenever it loses its destination, to take it safely to the shore, it is only the lighthouse that guides the ship. So the research question is like the right lighthouse for a researcher. So sometimes when you are lost in your research, sometimes if your passion fizzles out, sometimes when you lose your focus, sometimes when you deviate from your target, it is the research questions that will help you to refocus. So identify how to actually frame the research question. Now go to your topic, identify what kind of studies have been done in the past. Maybe you may look at a few dissertations, you may look at a few research papers in your field, and look at how previous researchers have raised questions related to your topic. Okay, so that is the starting point. Then you have to narrow down your topic, what kind of questions that I'm going to ask, and then you write down the questions. Okay, I will give you some examples of research questions a little later, but write down your questions. For example, I told you my research problem is students today feel very distracted in online classes. That is my, let me frame a research question. This is my question. See, there is a difference between a problem and a question. A problem is only one problem, but question could be many. So for example, my research question could be, why are students distracted in online classes compared to offline classes? My second research question could be, in which mode of instruction do students perform better? Is it in online classes or in offline classes? In which mode of teaching do students have better motivation? Is it in online classes or offline classes? See, my problem is only one, but I raise as many questions as possible, and my questions could be related to my research problem. So my second activity for you, write down your research problem and then raise a few questions about your work, and that is the starting point for your research question. Now let us look at this example. Now the first, look at the example from the bottom up. From the bottom is misses the target. Look at the example. Now I am going to raise a question related to divorce. Now look at the first question. How does the aftermath of divorce affect humanity? See, when couple end in divorce, it really affects the children psychologically. So how does it affect humanity? When I say humanity, am I going to study globally? Is it possible for me? Is it a researchable question? How can I study divorce globally? So it is not a question. I am not clear in my question. I am missing the target. When I say humanity, am I talking about the couple? Am I talking about the relatives who are affected? Am I talking about the children? Who am I talking about? So I have missed. Look at the second question. What effect does divorce have on children? Now this is specific to a certain extent. Because I am going to only, study children's psychology. Now look at the specific question, the third part. How does divorce influence children's social development? My second question could be, how does divorce influence students' mental development? How does a parent's divorce affect the child psychologically? So I have only one problem, but I could raise questions that are researchable. Am I making my point clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yeah. So moving on. So I'm going to give you a framework now called finer maps. So before I do that, I want all of you to have a tentative question related to your research. Now let me just look at you, just ask you a question for reflection. Now I told you, when I discussed about a research problem, I told you all to have a problem. Now I'm going to discuss research questions with you. I'm going to give you a framework called finer maps. I want you to have a question. Okay, what is the question you are investigating? Think about it. Can I have a volunteer to please give me a question if possible? I'm going to investigate on this question. I'm going to find the answer for this question. Why does it happen? Any volunteer who could actually think of and articulate a question? Can I have a volunteer who could? Okay, it doesn't matter but think about it. Think about it. I hope, even because it's a short span of time, it's very difficult to immediately arrive at a question, but I hope you are getting the essence of what I'm saying, right? Do you get the essence of what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So have a very clear research question. Now let us assume that you have a question, okay, that you're going to research throughout your 3 to 4 years. Now, your research question should have certain parameters. And let me tell you what the parameters are. Parameter number 1, look at these parameters. First one, I'm going to discuss a concept called the finer maps. Remember this acronym FINER-MAPS. F stands for, is your research question feasible? F stands for feasible. Now, if you look at the third question, which is in the bottom here, it is not feasible. How will aftermath of divorce affect humanity? Not feasible. Why it is not feasible? In a matter of 3 years, you cannot find the answers because you have to cover the entire literature. You are not specific about what you are going to research. So it is impossible. Maybe you need some 20 years to complete this research. This is called as feasibility. Okay. Now you can ask yourself these questions. Let me give you an elementary example, a simple example. Let us imagine a housewife goes to a vegetable market to purchase a vegetable, a tomato or a potato. Let us say that she investigates whether the vegetables are fresh, whether the vegetables will have a better shelf life. So she very carefully picks the vegetables. And then she might, in quantity, go for more quantity of onions and potatoes and less quantity of tomatoes. Maybe my example could be elementary, but then even when you purchase a vegetable, a simple housewife checks the feasibility, the practical possibility of storing it. And when it comes to research, will I be able to complete my research within a span of these 4 years? Okay, so that is called as the feasibility. So will I be able to complete my research within a particular duration is called as feasibility. So F stands for feasible. Feasible refers to possible. Is it possible? So I request the participants to please mute your microphone. Somebody's microphone is unmuted. A kind request, please mute your microphone. Okay, moving on. F stands for feasible. Second point, is your question interesting? Okay, second part is that, is your question interesting? Does it interest you? I just have to stop at this junction. Request the participants to kindly mute because I just get a noise from one of the participants, not muted, please. Thank you so much. Okay. Yeah. So is the question interesting? Who should find a question interesting? First of all, you should find it interesting. You should find it interesting. And you should also believe that your audience are going to find a question interesting. And you should also believe that, as I said before, your supervisor is also going to find it interesting. Above all, particularly the researcher who is working on that should find it interesting, and they should also sustain that interest for a period of time. Say, for example, 3 years. Is it possible for you to sustain that interest? So I stands for interesting. So kind request, participants, please mute your microphone. Somebody's microphone is unmuted. So I just hear the echo of my voice. Please, may I request the organizer to please mute, at least if in your end, if you can mute your microphone of the participants. Can you mute participants from your end? Because I find that there is a participant. Oh yeah, thank you so much. Yes. So second point is, your research question should be interesting. So finer, F stands for feasible. So you have raised a question. Do you find the question feasible? My second point is the question interesting to you? And let's move on to the third point. Let us move on to the third point. Is your question very novel? What is the meaning of novelty? Novelty refers to something that the previous researchers have not worked on. This is architectural novelty. I come across some buildings which are designed in the form of, bags. There is one in the form of a bag, the another in the form of a kettle, and there is a water tank in the form of a peach fruit. I find these kind of architectural novelty, but you can achieve novelty in any field. Even a literature researcher can achieve novelty by working on two different theories, by comparing two different authors as one is doing, by doing multidisciplinary research, by doing transdisciplinary research or sister disciplinary research. So Finer maps, FIN, N stands for novelty. So moving on, am I making myself clear to all of you?
Yes,
How
sir.
should your research
Yes, sir.
questions be? Yeah. Can you tell me what FIN, these 3 points you have discussed? F stands for
Feasibility,
feasibility. Thank you very much. I
Interest
stands
and-
for interesting. Thank
interesting,
you very much. And N stands for
novelty.
novelty. Yeah, your research should be very new. That is novelty. So after you frame your research questions, please go and see if your question meets up with these parameters. Okay, meets up with these parameters. Now, E, FINE, E stands for ethical. Ethical. Are you practicing a proper ethics? Because sometimes these days people just give some fake data. I've come across people who sometimes just give some imaginative numbers. Are you truly doing your research? Is it well documented? That is why there are some journals, when you write a research paper, there is an option to upload metadata, which means if you have conducted an interview with 40 people, you have to upload all those 40 interviews separately, but you will show the findings in the main paper. But some researchers they may not conduct an interview, but they may kind of interpret as if they have conducted. So ethics, are you true to yourself? Have you truly conducted your research? Is what is called as ethics, research ethics. Okay, and moving on, ethical. And I would just give me a second if you don't mind. I would just be back. If you don't mind, just give me 10 seconds. Will you please give me 10 seconds? I'll be right back. We will discuss about relevance.
Okay, sir.
I'm sorry to just make you wait. Okay, I hope you don't mind. Okay, coming back. So is your research relevant? So is your research relevant? What does relevance mean? Look at this particular picture. You don't require a parachute to move a boat, which means that your research should be very relevant to the context. You can't be working on an old problem. You can't rediscover the wheel. You can't say something that has already been said. It should be relevant to the current context. This is called the usefulness. This is also called the social impact. So think about it. Who is going to be benefited because of your research? Now, if your answer is nobody is going to be benefited, better drop the idea. That is called relevance. Suppose I am doing a particular research. How is it research going to be helpful to understand this text better? How is my new method going to help the teachers? Or if it is going to be an interpretive study, how is my particular interpretation going to open up new ideas for others? So that is called as relevance. So FINER. So we have discussed the feasibility. Is your research question feasible? And then we have discussed about, is your research question interesting? And then we have discussed about N, is your research question novel? And then we have discussed about E, is your research question ethical? And we have discussed about is your research question relevant? Is it practically useful to the society? Does it have impact? All right. So now let us move on to maps. FINER, finer, MAPS, maps. Since we are running out of time, I've been given exactly 1 hour. So let me try to accelerate my lecture a little bit. MAP stands for, is your research manageable? Like, can you complete? For example, let us say you are doing a comparative study on 2 novels. Manageable. Let us say you are taking 5 particular novels and making comparative study on 5 novels. Not manageable. Suppose you are doing an intervention study in medical sciences research or a case study with 2 patients or 10 patients, manageable. But you are doing a case study with 100 patients, not manageable. Let us say I am doing my attention deficit problem with my 50 students in a particular class. Let us say I conduct that in 10 classrooms, not manageable. So do something that you can manage. And then M stands for manageable, A stands for appropriate. Is it appropriate to that age group that you are doing? Is it appropriate to the current context? And P stands for publishable. That is why this is a very important aspect. Is your research publishable? Now, sometimes many researchers pick some old ideas which has already been done. Probably they can write a thesis, but they cannot publish an impactful research paper if their idea is not new. So check out if your idea is publishable, because only when your idea is new, the editor will publish your idea. So almost all your research is going to be based on your thesis. So make sure that it is a very good problem statement. Make sure that your research questions fall under finer maps so that your area will be publishable. And ultimately, is your work systematic? Is it systematic? Step A, step B, step C. Am I going from, if you are going from a destination from A to Z or A to C, you should very clearly give a roadmap on how you are going to reach from point A to point B. So that is systematic. So friends, just think about it, reflect on this aspect of finer maps when you discuss or think about your research question. So today what you're going to do after the lecture, maybe you're just going to go home, jot down a problem statement roughly. Secondly, you are going to write down, after one problem, you are going to write down maybe 2 or 3 research questions. And perhaps for each research question, you are going to see if your research question caters to finer maps, whether your research question is feasible, whether it is interesting, whether it is novel, whether it is ethical, whether it is researchable, whether it is manageable, if it is appropriate, if it is publishable, or if it is systematic. So maybe you may not be able to find all this in your research questions, but if you can find 3 or 4 aspects of it, I think your question is a very effective research question. So friends, I think I have made my second point very clear. My first point, how to frame a suitable research problem. My second part of my lecture was how to frame, formulate suitable research questions. Now, am I clear in my second point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Because now and then, as I said, being an online class, I require this kind of reaffirmation. So there is also another framework. Probably we may not have time to discuss this. There is also another framework to describe the research questions, and this is called the PICO framework. So what is your population? ELT researchers, medical researchers, what is going to be a sample size, who is going to be your students, or so that is called the PICO framework. What is going to be the intervention? What kind of comparison are going to make? What is going to be the outcome? So we may not have time to discuss this PICO framework, but maybe you can just Google and know more about it. So research scholars, you should know that you need to, whenever you frame research questions, you need to understand both finer maps and the PICO framework. PICO framework is especially for medical researchers, ELT researchers, quantitative researchers, empirical researchers, and intervention researchers. But finer maps is for both researchers, both qualitative and quantitative, whether you are from field of literature or life sciences. Finer maps will be a suitable framework for formulating your research questions. So this is how it is. So initially you start with a broad topic, then you kind of narrow your topic, then you further narrow it, and then based on that, you write your research questions. So I'm going to make my final point, because since I'm running out of time, I would like to just stick to the time and not encroach on the other speaker's time. So I would exactly finish in another few minutes, and perhaps at the end I will take a couple of questions if time permits or if the organizers permit. So now you have framed a problem and you have framed research questions. Now you have to formulate hypothesis. Not every researcher has to formulate hypothesis, but let me give you an elementary example for a hypothesis. Now, what is the meaning of hypothesis? It is a tentative answer to a research question. Now, after framing the research question, you will assume the answer. What is the answer? My answer is, my new method of teaching is going to increase students' concentration levels. So before I complete my research, I have arrived at that answer, my assumption. That is called as formulating hypothesis. But since we don't have time, I'll give you a simple example. Let us take this statement: an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Okay. Now, my hypothesis is, if people consume one apple a day, they will not have any medical problems. This is called hypothesis. And there is also null hypothesis, which means I can take the opposite of it. If people consume an apple a day, that doesn't mean that they will not have problems. Still, they will have problems. So, using these two, I may choose any one and justify, do an experimentation. Take one group. For a period of 3 months, I will just give them one apple every day, make them eat. And the other person will eat unhealthy stuff. And then I check the blood composition levels. I check how agile they are. I check their cognitive capacity. So that is one way to do it. So, I mean, the example I'm giving you could be very, very a rudimentary example, but within a short span of time, I think that examples will have a better reach. Okay. So your hypothesis should have a variable. What is the meaning of variable? Your hypothesis should have two variables. One is called the independent variable and the other is called dependent variable. Now, independent variable, what is the independent variable? The apple is the independent variable. What is the dependent variable? I am healthy is a dependent variable. Now, in my research, online teaching, okay, it's online teaching using exciting videos could be an independent variable. Students' improvement in levels of concentration could be a dependent variable. So probably hypothesis itself is a very, very detailed lecture. Maybe because we are running out of time, we should keep it for another day. So as I said, these are the two ways: hypo and alternative hypothesis. So this is the website called the, I'm also a research consultant and research strategist for a particular organization called Alpha Researchers Academy. If you want, you can just Google it, alpharesearchersacademy.org, and you have my contact details here, because we do editing services, research enhancement services, plagiarism, related services. And, I have given my details to our website, and the details to the YouTube channel, and the details to the official mail ID. And if you have any clarifications, you may even mail us to alpha@alpharesearchersacademy.com. And we also do some kind of, social outreach, any kind of free help or assistance. If you want also, you can just mail us. I have just given you the mobile number here. So, but editing services we do, especially for researchers who are submitting their thesis, because we have a great team of people, retired professors who do the work in our academy. So if you want to use our services at nominal cost, you're most welcome. And I just took 1 minute for saying what we do, but my focus was not on promoting what I do, but my focus was on the job given to me. 3 objectives I had. The first objective was, I'll stop sharing. My first objective was helping you to formulate very clear problem statement. My second objective was to give you an outline or a framework for research questions. And my third objective was to give you a framework for hypothesis. I hope I have done justice to what was given to me. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to take it. Over to the organizers. So I'm just banged. I'm sorry, I have consumed 1 minute of the other speaker's time. I stop here. If the organizers permit me, probably if there are questions, you can chuck your questions at me. I would be glad to answer them. Yeah, over
It
to
was
the
very good, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you. So kind of you.
Really
Thank you.
enjoyed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any questions? Over to the organizers. Anybody can moderate the questions. If there are no questions, then over to the organizers.
Sir, can you please explain that PICO is relevant for which kind of research? You said empirical research, experimental research.
Exactly, ma'am. Exactly. Yeah, good question. May I know your area, ma'am? What's the area that you are working on?
Mine is public administration,
Public. What's your research topic?
waste management.
Okay. Is your research based on intervention? Comparing 2 groups?
No.
Okay.
No.
See, this PICO framework is for medical researchers, for ELT researchers who compare 2 models. For example, one model could be offline teaching, another model could be online teaching. Or it could be medical researchers giving a new drug to a patient, A and B. Which drug is effective? So, a PICO framework is very suitable for people who do empirical research, who do field work, who do quantitative studies, and especially for people from the applied domains, probably like life sciences, or it could be even computer assisted language learning, intervention studies, using new models, new technologies. It's only for those people. But for the social sciences researchers, I think I'm sure that the finer maps framework will be an appropriate framework for formulating the research questions. Thank you very much, ma'am, for that.
Thank
lovely
you.
question.
Thank you.